So we are trying to lead people back to within themselves so they can experience that healing. Isn't that so?
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's God first. And as
Yeah.
you find that and you're able to relax, and even just the breathing. And if you notice when Larry shared about where certain sicknesses and viruses are, they're here.
Yeah.
And it's the shallow of the breath. That's the true essence of God's life, breathing life within us. And how can we get there if we've got everything magnified in front of us for any kind of healing, especially in our mindset? Our mindset is what triggering everything, because what we've chosen to hear, what we've chosen to take in. So why don't we know and come awake to the word that's within us? God's living word is within us. Why don't we seek him first and be directed that way, instead of waiting on that answer over there, this medical answer there?
There's another word that you mentioned here is control. That we are feeling controlled by situations, and we are being influenced and controlled by certain situations, institutions, society, opinions that are out there clearly. And it's really making that shift. And I come back to the thought of our gap theory that we always mention. We have that one side, and I'm going to call it today the control side, that's trying to control us. And we want to make that gap over to the surrender side, where we be able to surrender to God. And because, as you said, Aina, with God, all things are possible. And,
everything.
and the healing is deep within us, you mentioned, Aina. And the name of our mission here as Grace Healing is Grace Healing.
Yeah.
It just occurs to me. So we are trying to lead people back to within themselves so they can experience that healing. Isn't that so?
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's God first. And as you find that and you're able to relax, and even just the breathing. And if you notice when Larry shared about where certain sicknesses and viruses are, they're here. And it's the shallow of the breath. That's the true essence of God's life, breathing life within us. And how can we get there if we've got everything magnified in front of us for any kind of healing, especially in our mindset? Our mindset is what triggering everything, because what we've chosen to hear, what we've chosen to take in. So why don't we know and come awake to the word that's within us? God's living word is within us. Why don't we seek him first and be directed that way, instead of waiting on that answer over there, this medical answer there, this belief over here? I don't know about this. We're going into another issue. How about let's just surrender everything and welcoming God into those places.
Yeah, you just said, Aina, that we choose what we hear. But,
Yes.
science also tells us, psychology also tells us there's a subconscious. We hear things that we don't choose. It's just there. And then we react and we build our life around that, but we didn't choose that. So how do we reconcile that? How do we work with that?
Well, what you were just talking about with Ina Marie, and the thing we have to be careful of, is one of the things that she mentioned was critical spirit, judgment, confusion. And people are not relinquishing those things first and replacing them with God's presence. And again, we go back to Yeshua's words. If we release anything of a spirit nature, meaning lesser spirit, small spirit, spiritual influence, or a demonic nature, we must welcome the presence of God within this place, or many of like kind will return. So if we're feeding on the spiritual nature within ourselves and we sense discord, or we sense the spirit of control, and now we want to control everybody to do as we think is right, We're embracing that spirit of control that you described, Andreas. We're embracing the spirit of judgment that Ina Marie described, and the critical nature of looking upon others. And then she described how all of a sudden it ends up with a bunch of confusion. God is perfection. God is not confusion. God is order, clarity, understanding, wisdom. So we would relinquish that spiritual confusion. We would relinquish that feeling of an overwhelming nature. Oh my God, if I see one more news report, I'm going to be blown away. I can't understand what I'm supposed to do. It's like, right, because you're giving yourself input from the winds of the earth. You're not relinquishing the spiritual confusion.
But Larry, we need to recognize it first. Most people sit in front of the TV and don't even realize that they're being influenced. And
well, because they've been deceived to think they don't hold the answer within them. They must find a media source to gain the information. Like in my experience, my son and I both encountered the Delta form. No big deal. We didn't go to fear. We didn't go into the institutions of man to look how to deal with it. We just centered upon the presence of God, and I was out of it within 6 days, and he took 12 days. It's like, it's fine. We weren't in fear of death. So we're in this place of searching the measure of God's presence, and it's like, whatever. And in that, I found certain grief and sorrow and resistance within me. I was resistant to certain things that were rising in my life. My son was resistant to his responsibility within the work setting that he was in, and he allowed this thing to enter into his self. And then also the fact that he had lost his big brother and I had lost my, so we allowed ourselves to embrace this short excursion through this experience. But we did not seek the fears of the media platform. We did not seek the fears of man. We sought God, what are we supposed to do within this? We prayed, we moved through the processes and the instruments that God gave us. In releasing it, we released the things of spiritual nature. And like Ina Marie said, we set forth any confusion that was within us. We set forth any doubt that was within us. We released spiritual resistance. That we sat with God's presence until God's presence emerged within that place. And then we found peace within the decisions that we made, and we moved forward according to God's design. We did not alter our body. We did not alter the nature of how our DNA is formed. We did not alter anything of the nature of how we were created. We sought God for the nature of how his spirit could manifest these results within us. And we released the spiritual revelations that came of it, that confusion, that critical nature, that spiritual resistance. We released those things and sent it into God's presence on it. And yes, my son is 16. So maybe it took him a few extra days to actually let it become one within him. And it took me the 6 days to become one within it. I should have been able to do it instantaneously. So Larry is still looking at himself saying, so I should have been able to relinquish this behavior within my body at recognition. Something within me held me in it for 6 days. Ina Marie was nice enough to engage with me in prayers of agreement. And as we sought through the prayer, we found the resistance within Larry at day 3. Then at day 3, it took another 3 days to get it out of my system because my body still needed to have come back into order with what it was. So there is a reality that we can go to God within these answers, or we can rely upon the answers with men. And in my call, I've been led to choose God. So I chose the prayer of agreement with Ina Marie. I chose the prayer of agreement with my son. That was through that measure of knowledge that was given me. And I desire to acknowledge God and God's glory above what I could accomplish on my own. So God provided me a map. So as I walked this out, it was walked out in such a way that I can look and I can say, look what God did, not what the science of men did. That's my walk and journey. It may not be everybody's, but that's the way I've been called to do it.
So Ina, how did you experience that 6-day journey of Larry's when you worked with him in prayer?
Well, again, you know what we've found, that we're all human beings, and yes, God resides within us, and sicknesses and viruses have been going on since the beginning of time. And this is like nothing different. We engaged in prayer because he needed prayer for, he's still holding on to something. He's finding the prayer. And so we engage 2 or more are gathered. And that helps to release those captives. But we just, you treat it as you see God first. You treat it as is not in fear. It's to just, you need to engage with another to release those things.
And
So,
Anna Marie, can I interrupt for a second?
yes.
I have no problem being transparent about this. Ina Marie helped me receive the fact that I was resistant to receiving blessing in a certain place of my life that is very private to me, but I was resistant to it. And Ina Marie, in love and support with her husband, Albert, they were able to help me see that I was resistant to receiving that blessing. Then together we joined in the prayer and released it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I just had a little bit of an aha moment here. You know, when we talk a lot about releasing, right, and releasing captives, and in this whole conversation we are having here today, I was constantly in the back of my mind thinking, I need to release the news reports.
Yeah.
I need to release the opinions of others, what they may say about the situation, but that's not it. What you're talking about is I need to go within and release. Wow, this
Deeper.
is amazing. Yeah.
Deeper.
That is amazing. I never thought of it that
Now there
way.
is a component that's truth in what you just said. We need to go deeper to release the spiritual root within these things.
Yeah.
That fear governing us or whatever happens to be, or the confusion or whatever. But then we can also ascend from that spiritual ground into the earthly nature and release the words we've embraced of the medical system, or we've embraced of the political system, or we've embraced of the media system. These are spiritual entities upon the earth. And that's what maybe people don't understand. Corporate entities are here to reveal the demonic, period. That's what they are formed for. So when we, like when Yeshua said to release anything of a spiritual, small s, spiritual nature, or of a demonic nature, he spoke 2 different words, defining 2 different things. There are spiritual influences upon the individual, and there are demonic influences upon the corporate entities.
Yeah.
The demonic divides into the body of humanity, and then it coalesces within people that are like thinkers. And so if you have corporate entities that are a job place or a church or a business or a governmental entity, these things will reveal demonic things. The individual will reveal spiritual things. So once we've released the spiritual attachments that we have to it through fear, confusion, resistance, now we can look to, oh, I see how the corporate entity was influencing my thought process. When I went to see if I had cancer, and I sat before a doctor that is representative of the medical institution, he expounded and gave me 14,000 words. But I only heard God within 4,000 of them. So I set aside the 10,000 words that are not God, and I embrace the 4,000 that are God. So I consciously released the spirits of fear that he gave me. I released the spirits of concern around this issue, of the spiritual doubt that within the things that I did find, where if I could just increase my vitamin C intake, and I could increase my vitamin D intake, and I could go to the extremes of vitamin C intake, instead of just taking 1,000 IUs a day, I was led to take 5,000 IUs a day. And all of a sudden we find ways that God could guide us through the purity of our bodies, through the purity of the instruments that he's formed upon the earth, to bring our body back into alignment. And we may have heard that within the 3,000 to 4,000 words the doctor offered, not the additional 10,000 that he expounded in his wealth of knowledge from man. So again, are we measuring God first? Then we release the spiritual fears that we embraced, and then we set loose what you described, the media platform, the political platform, the medical platform, the institution of science platform, because science we used to know in the 40s and 50s was considered solid then. Now it's like nothing, because half the science has proved most of what they believed then was not truth. So we have to search the presence of God, not the nature of how certain knowledge is governing us. Then we can release. You know, these words I embraced the other day while I was sitting watching that news report, I got to let them go. I honestly, even though some of them were something I feel like I could agree with because it's what I believe, no, I got to even let them go. I got to sit before the presence of God. And in that, I just found a peace overtake me. I found a peace and understanding. And then I was revealed to the spirit of fear. Oh, I still hold a fear in this. What if this could kill me? I let that fear go because there is no death. Yeshua overpowered death. And so we go through this process, like Yeshua said, there is an unceasing awareness of prayer. Then there is a fervent level of prayer. So the unceasing awareness of prayer is God's breath is ever present within me. God's breath is the living force that governs me. All of a sudden I can't breathe because I've run upon a certain disease that's showing up in the pandemic views of the world. I can't breathe properly. I'm severing myself from the possibility of gaining divine breath. Now I go into fervent prayer. I release any grief, resistance, sadness, sorrow, and I center upon God's presence. I am released of all these spiritual influence. Then I discover what Andreas was talking about. I can remember that there was demonic influence that came through the things I was witnessing on the media platform, or the political platform, or the scientific platform. I was witnessing these things and I release them. And I become God's presence in this moment. Then I find the peace and I know the clarity of the decision I'm to make.
Wonderful.
But the thing is, most humans won't permit themselves the time to do that.